Hi, everybody. John Haldy here, and I am excited because I've got Ed Traud of CSP Resources with me. For those of you who are new to these video conversations, I have a software company that caters to the Fedex linehaul community. Happy to tell you about it another time, but the star of the show today is Ed and CSP Resources, and we're going to talk about First Advantage. One quick sidebar, I don't know if y'all have ever had these experiences, but Ed's video is not behaving today. So you're going to be forced to look at me. Apologies in advance, but happily his audio is working, and we wanted to get this out because we are an annual review, and I think we're going to talk about some very timely stuff. So Ed, welcome. Good morning.
Thank you. Good morning.
It's great to have you here. Would you mind sharing a little bit about your background and who you are?
Absolutely. Again, my name is Ed Traud. I am the CEO, President, Grand Poobah, if you will, of CSP Resources. Previously, I worked at Fedex for 15 years. I started in sales with Fedex and then transitioned to linehaul and PGH. I was a linehaul planner. I started working the overnights like everyone else, and ran the network in the evenings, and then moved up to planning. And I actually used to handle a lot of the purchased line haul department. We ran the dedicated fleets for peak. We handled all the power only carriers, and we did a lot of the supplemental work. And then I ran a backhaul program for them as well to fill up empty freight. I had a temp a few peaks ago, and we built a platform for line haul to speed up the processing of the outside carriers, and was recruited out of that group to go to what is now BDS. At the time, it was Contractor Relations. And I helped stand up the First Advantage platform. And once we rolled that out, when it would hit the whole network, there were a lot of issues and hiccups in the beginning. Once we stood that up and started running, I realized very quickly I could be more effective on this side of the table than at the FedEx side of the table. And from that point, CSP Resources was born.
And that was how long ago?
3 years now.
Okay.
Yeah.
And do you work with just linehaul or linehaul and P&D?
I work with both. I have clients in the P&D space, clients in the linehaul space. We have hybrid clients that have both. So and that's an interesting space as well, where you're managing one First Advantage account for two different types of drivers.
And your primary service, your core competency is helping get drivers into the system and approved?
Correct. We try to expedite the process as best you can. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of expediting you can do, but there are a lot of hiccups through the process that we essentially, we're troubleshooters. We look for those issues, we resolve them, we get the drivers back on track to get them through the process as quick as possible.
Okay. And I'm not going to ask you to get into specifics about how you get paid and how the billing, the pricing works and all that stuff, but we're going to put in the video here all of Ed's contact information, both during the video. Our techies are going to do that after the fact. And then at the end, we're going to have all of our contact info. So those of you who are interested in contacting Ed about this, you'll have all the ways to get in touch with him. Ed, I know that annual review is going on right now as we're recording this, and that's a big hot topic issue.
Yes.
But with your permission, I'd like to start with sort of some of the more basic blocking and tackling things about First Advantage, and then we can get to annual review. Is that okay?
Absolutely.
I hear from a lot of contractors that they are facing a lot of challenges getting drivers through the system. It's a tough environment right now to recruit drivers, and they can be very frustrated when they have a good driver, a good lead, if you will, and they end up fumbling the ball in terms of getting them into First Advantage and approved in a timely manner, and that driver goes somewhere else because they can't wait for a job opening to be approved. Do you hear that too? Is that
absolutely? Absolutely. Everything we touch is on fire every day. we're constantly in a stressed firefighting position, making sure that we're getting drivers through. I can tell you the best approach is proper planning. And I know that's very easy for me to say, but the space itself is very difficult to navigate. Starting at the driver level, just getting a driver to be able to fill out an application is a task. It's not the easiest application by any means. There are hiccups in it, but I will say you're looking at about a 20% success rate in that space. So if you need to fill a position, you need to be bringing 5 candidates to the table to send applications to, because they're going to fail out for various reasons.
Let me just make sure I understand that, because I'm a bit of a dunce on these things. I'm not an operator. When you say 20% success rate, would you say that that's of 5 drivers properly put into the system with all the correct information, you're going to fail out 4 out of 5 because they're just not qualified? Or is it 20% get through because contractors make mistakes on entering the information and they DQ them? The contractors DQ because they fumble the ball themselves.
It's a little bit of both, but I would say that 20% really starts at the very beginning on how many application links you send out. So if you need a driver, you should be shooting for 5 application links sent to drivers, because the reality is it's the laws of numbers. If you've ever been in sales, I spent probably 25 years in sales. We always learn about pipelines, and I talk about drivers as if they're clients that you're trying to bring on board, or prospects. So we look at driver pipelines and we build those and manage those on like a daily basis to keep the contractors up to date on where their drivers are in the process. But you need to get roughly, and it varies by market, honestly. Some markets are better, some markets are worse, but you need to be pushing about 5 application links out to drivers, because in reality, of those 5, 3 of them are probably going to fill the application out. And from those 3, one of them might fail out. One of them might decide this isn't their position. One of them, you might, as a contractor, you might decide this guy really isn't the right fit. So ultimately, you're going to end up around 1 driver getting all the way through the process.
So a question jumps out, but if I could take you on a quick detour, have
Absolutely.
I heard correctly that when you send these links out, the Fedex implementation of First Advantage doesn't allow the drivers to fill that out on a phone, that they have to be on a computer to do it?
Yes and no. The application, they've released a new application that's more mobile friendly, but from what I can see from looking across, the breadth of our client base, not all of them are at that platform yet. And honestly, the reason behind it is it rolled out right before peak. So they wanted to get it out there, but they also didn't want the whole, if it failed, they didn't want the whole system to crash. So there are some, I can see it, and there's some telltale signs if you're getting those kind of apps that we can see on the back end to tell right away. As soon as I open an application, I can tell if they're on the new version of the old.
So if I were a contractor and I were sending someone a link, how would I know whether or not I could tell the applicant it's mobile friendly, use your phone, or it's not, don't use a phone?
The header in the subject line is different now. In a perfect world, we send out the links for our clients, and what that does is that allows us to track everything full circle, including the links. Yes, the new email that you'll see, it says you have been invited to kick off your new background check. That is the new header. That is usually a very strong indicator that you are under the new application process. And I have to believe that at this point, the vast majority of the network is using the new application.
Okay, so that's good progress, right?
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, the old email used to say action required, request for information.
user friendly.
Oh, very. I've had, yeah, so I'm very fortunate. I was in the driver qual space. I was both the East and the South quals contact. I can tell you from both sides of the table, I have argued that just that subject alone, that subject line alone is problematic because it looks like spam mail.
Right.
It really does.
Right. You've been invited to apply to get your Nigerian $1 million if you
Yes.
send 500,000 to us now.
Yeah, exactly. The king is waiting.
Yeah. Okay. So okay. Thanks for clearing that up for me. Going back to what you talked about the funnel, my first thought when you said that though, is there a way, if First Advantage is a little cumbersome, is there a way to move some of the disqualifying things further up in the recruiting process to improve your First Advantage success rate? I mean, can you find out earlier some things that would DQ them and not even bother putting them in First Advantage?
Absolutely. So I can tell you the best practices that I see with our successful clients, and from a recruiting perspective, is they're asking the questions: do you have at least 1 year in the last 3 or 5 in the last 10 in a tractor? If they can't answer that space, you need to decide as a contractor, do I want to bring someone in without the tractor experience? Because there are ways to do that. You can bring someone in as an entry-level driver, but you need to have the processes on your back end to be able to support that. Like, you need to have lead drivers. You need to have the opportunity for them to ride with those lead drivers in order to meet that experience level. The other question is always criminal related, because Fedex has a very hard and fast rule about criminal backgrounds. And we used to joke when I was in linehaul, or I'm sorry, when I was in driver calls, that there's the big five. If you have a driver that has had anything to do with drugs, guns, violence, theft, or children, any charge in those related fields, and now it seems to be it's in the last 10 years, they're disqualified. They're most likely not going to get through the system. And I will say, to add to that, it's important to know that when they look at that criminal background check, they're not looking at the date the driver was charged. They're looking at what they call the disposition date. So if a driver is charged with aggravated assault in 2015, for example, but we'll say January to make it easy. If he was arrested in January 2015, but he didn't go to court until May, and then the court put him on probation for 6 months, that disposition date is the end of his probation.
Okay.
So right, and that's an important thing to understand, because a lot of times we get in these conversations with drivers like, well, that charge was 7 years ago. I'm like, it was, sir, but you had to serve 2 years in prison. So that put you now at the 5-year mark, because we go by the day you got out of prison.
So it's the day it's completely behind them, basically.
Yes, exactly. And they've been relinquished of all debt, so to speak.
Okay. Good to know. I mean, I guess it makes sense. I can see their perspective on it.
Yes. And I can tell you, sometimes you will see a driver who legitimately has never done anything wrong not pass a criminal background check. And that can happen for one specific reason. They might have an open court case. And FedEx's position on that is, we don't know how that court case will end. So we are going to fail as criminal for the moment until that court case is closed. And it could be a child support case, a custody case, a speeding ticket, but they just don't know what the outcome of that hearing has been. And most of them are fairly civil, but I have seen situations where a husband or an ex-husband and an ex-wife, a father and a mother, go toe to toe in a courtroom, and one of them gets arrested So that's kind of the logic behind what they're looking at. So just because he has an open, and that's important to know, if they have an open court date, they're not disqualified indefinitely. They're just temporarily disqualified till it's resolved.
Okay, so not presumed innocent.
Correct.
Okay. Another big question or thing that I hear a lot, contractors seem to feel like the First Advantage system is illogical, that it doesn't make sense to them. It's just a black box and they don't know why it sometimes spits things out the way it does, and they feel frustrated. Is that a fair criticism?
Absolutely. When I moved into that space, I was not an engineer. I did not work in safety. I never worked in this space at all. I came from linehaul. And when I sat down, and we're going back to 2018, I sat down and they handed me the quick guide on how to process a driver. It was 83 pages long.
The quick guide?
The quick guide. And I looked at everybody in the meeting who they were very proud of this quick guide. I'm sorry, what is quick about this?
What was the long guide?
Right, exactly. It was basically the developers' technical notes. And then they funneled it down to what they thought was acceptable. And we went back and took a different approach. And I read the material, and I said, none of this makes sense. I understand they're contractors and they should know their contracting thing, but you're asking them to understand a very technical space. And we just basically upset their apple cart. They went from what was kind of like a self-service process at one point. If you were a contractor and you were hiring me as a driver, you would take me to the station. The FedEx staff would process the driver at the station level, and they would hand you back a driver if he was ready to badge. You didn't have to do anything. The problem with that is you run into all the legalities of the dual employment space that they're constantly fighting in. So they decided they had to put a wall up, and they had to put it back to the contractor. In my opinion, and I've been very vocal about this, from the onset of this platform, the biggest failure was when they rolled it out, they didn't actually explain that it was moving from a full service to a self-service platform. So contractors would say, oh, I've had this guy in here for 30 days. I can't get him through. And this is at the very beginning. And they're looking like, sir, you didn't upload his med card and he didn't take his drug test yet. Well, how am I supposed to know that? And that would be the argument. And, you're right. How would you know that? But I feel like if someone would have taken a minute at the beginning and said, hey, this is self-service now. You're going to have to watch this. It needs to become part of your process as a company to manage the background process on them. That would have probably changed the atmosphere a little bit.
Okay. So let's say I'm a contractor and I've got 5 candidates and I'm expecting one to get through, and I can look at them and I go, this is the one, a magical candidate that's going to get through the process. They've got all the qualifications. How can I, as a contractor, educate myself on how to move them through First Advantage as fast as possible?
Okay, so the first thing you need to make sure, if in the very beginning of sending the link out to the driver, you have to make sure you have them in the right position and the right package. And if as a contractor, if you're in that space, those terms make sense. So essentially, you need to make sure if you are hiring a P&D driver or a line haul driver that you pick P&D or line haul at the onset. And then underneath that, you make sure you order a P&D or a line haul order for that driver. We see it all the time where people get those things flipped around. One of the next important components is really making sure you pick the right station. If you need the guy to run out of Lehigh, you need to submit his application with the Lehigh station on it. And why that's important is First Advantage. There are essentially 3 different software platforms that are doing this. First Advantage is split into 2 sides of the house. You have the background side, and then you have the driver file side. Then add CDAS into the equation. So,
CS for an idiot like me is?
oh, CDAS, that is I always forget what the acronym. It's like contractor, driver, and something system. It's
Okay.
essentially, it's
Oh, CDAS.
CDAS, correct.
Got it. Okay.
Yes, yes. So what happens is when you submit that application to that driver, they take information from the application and send it to CDAS, which creates what's called a person request inside of CDAS. And that's the gateway for a driver to get into the system. If that gateway is incorrect in the system, no matter how hard you try, he's not going to get through the system. And on the very beginning, that was a huge problem. People would pick, he's a P&D driver, but they would select line haul as the type of background. Okay. So, and that, when you look at it, you're like, I don't understand the big deal, but it has a lot to do with whether they ran the right types of backgrounds for these drivers. So making sure from the very beginning that link is sent out correctly and the information's collected correctly on that driver, on his application, it's the cornerstone of the process. From that point, once that driver is in the system, it really is a lot of knowing where to look to find errors. Things are going to go wrong. And really just walking through that system. If you're a line haul contractor, which this is probably going to hit 99% of that market, when you're looking at a driver in First Advantage, everything should be this will make sense if you've ever looked at the space. Everything will be green with the exception of employment. Employment is the only thing that should be yellow. They use like a green, yellow, red moniker so that you know where they're at in the process. If one of the things that is yellow is not employment, that's a problem and we need to resolve it. So we look for those things. We're scanning our clients' accounts and their driver applications daily. Every day we're in our clients' accounts, and on what we call our non-reporting days, we are sweeping their accounts. We're looking for orders that, applications that have been completed but not ordered. We do like a 48-hour reporting cycle, and what that means is we will send you a report with an update on all of your drivers every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And Tuesdays and Thursdays, we're chasing things for those drivers. And for an example, if we're waiting for a med card to approve, if we uploaded it Monday afternoon, we're checking it Tuesdays. If that driver goes compliant that day, we're going to send you an email. We're not going to send you a full-blown report. And it's because everything inside of First Advantage runs in a 24-hour interval. So doing a report every day is inefficient. You end up chasing your tail a lot, chasing after the same problems. It's really, we've figured out the cadence pretty well of how the information flows and how things are fixed. And we found it's most effective to just plug yourself into that cadence and follow it directly.
Okay. And you'd recommend that contractors do similar on their own if they're not working with you?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, there's no harm in looking at it every day, but it's important to understand that, if you send an email, and I butt up against this on a daily basis. In my opinion, it is a huge waste of time to pick the phone up and call First Advantage. And if you've ever heard anybody talk about calling First Advantage, the first thing they're going to tell you is, I was on hold for an hour and a half. Then I may or may not have gotten hung up on, and I had to call back. I learned at first, when I worked at Fedex, I learned right away, and they were very frank about it. If you want a quicker response, email. Email is the fastest thing you can do. We can do far more. We can resolve far more problems in a day via email than by telephone. And no matter what they tell you, whether you call First Advantage or you email them, it takes about 24 hours. I mean, I have conversations daily. Oh, well, they said they're going to have it fixed in a few minutes. They're not. They're going to put it in queue to have it fixed in a few minutes, which means in 24 hours. And I have chased these and done comparison. I've had clients call and I've sent an email at the exact same time. The problem was resolved at the exact same time. So in our space, we've realized quickly it is a waste of resources to spend your day on the phone.
Yeah, I've gone to contractors' operations, seen their offices function. I can't imagine what happens when they have an hour and a half hold time and it's just
Yeah,
wasting time. I mean,
it is. And we tell clients all the time, if you're spending an hour or 2 hours a week of your time on the phone with First Advantage, you can easily afford us. Just simply because we're gonna give you those 2 hours back, and what is your time worth?
and if there's a contractor out there who's trying to get them through the system and they're looking at First Advantage once a week, I'm guessing in your mind that's a total fail.
I mean, it's not a total fail, but it's going to slow the process down. On average, right now, it's taking 3-4 weeks to get some drivers through. It depends. I mean, at the end of the day, this is kind of like, I wouldn't call this a trade secret, but I would tell you it's important to structure the information that and I'm going to say this as generic as possible, so I never get in trouble for saying it out loud. It's important to structure the information on the driver's application. That is simply because right now, especially, we're still dealing with pandemic conditions. There are courthouses that are backed up weeks, months. I mean, I've got drivers that have been sitting 45, 60 days waiting for a criminal background check to come down. They're backed up. So the more addresses that a potential driver puts into that application, the more criminal background checks are done. So if a guy has moved 5 states now, and this is where it's important to say, you want to make sure you're including all the pertinent information, but not giving so much that it actually bogs everything down. So it's a very fine line. If a guy moved around and he's moved 5 states, you now have a international, a national, a state criminal for each 3 states, and then potentially a county and a municipality search for every one of those addresses, right? So the more you put in there, the longer it's going to take your driver to get through. And the same thing with employment. With employment, I mean, you need to get that 1 in 3, 5 in 10, but the more irrelevant jobs you put in there, or the more jobs that don't fall in that 1 in 3 and 5 and 10, the longer it takes, because there are legitimately human beings that are trying to verify that, and they take 4 attempts over 3 days to verify that employment, and it's always bad. So it compounds how long it takes a driver to get through the system.
Okay. Yeah. And what does the world look like on the other side of the fence if I was a contractor trying to get something resolved? Is it a big team on the other end? Are they in the US? Are they offshore? Are there language issues? Are they overwhelmed? What's the story there?
Oh, it's a little bit of all of those things, actually. There are, First Advantage is US based. They have teams in the United States, but they do subcontract some of the work out. So, and I can tell you, inside of the background checks, a large portion of it is automated whenever possible. NVR checks, commercial driver's license checks, Social Security checks, those are all automated. Criminal checks are usually automated, but where you run into a problem is these smaller municipalities, these smaller county courthouses. There are some folks that are still doing it by pulling out logbooks and going page by page and pulling that information out. And there isn't, unfortunately, anything FedEx or First Advantage can do to circumvent that or expedite it, because you're at the mercy of the courthouse. Very much like the drug screening. You're at the mercy of the clinic. You're at the mercy of the lab, and they're not owned by First Advantage. So they really can't call and yell at them to speed the process up. So we always tell people, control the controllables. If you can control the controllables, let your driver go do his drug screen as soon as possible. Let's get his med card now. Let's get him to go into the clearinghouse. Let's eliminate all of those issues. We can fix those things. The hard parts it really comes down to the employment verification. And those folks they're offshore in India. English is not their first language, and transportation probably isn't even their third language. They're order takers. They read a script and they ask the questions that you see in the employment verification. And if they don't get complete yes or no answers, they will answer no or put no information. And that essentially sounds like, you're calling to verify employment for a driver, and he worked for me and I have 5 trucks. I'm a small operation, outside of FedEx, running on my own. And you call me, I'm the owner, I'm going to answer the phone. I'm going to say, yeah, he drove for me. He drove a reefer. They do not know what a reefer is. So the problem with that is they'll record that as he did not drive a tractor. And that's the most critical question on that entire employment verification is, did he drive a tractor trailer? That needs to be a very simple yes. We are actually working on a project now to help fix that. We're hoping like that space, it's taking 2 to 3 weeks, sometimes 4 weeks to get certain drivers through the system. We're looking to shrink it down to 5 days. And you're going to be able to hopefully turn drivers as quickly as you do in the P&D space, essentially. We're going to eliminate the problem with employment. We're still where it's still in project phase. We're doing some QAT testing on that right now this week to see if all the data points are connecting and the information is flowing the way we need it to. Everybody can access the data. Once we get that thing up and running, the problem's no longer a problem.
Just to be clear, because you used to wear a FedEx hat, when you say you're working on that, that's CSP resources.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. You might be inundated with some calls after this.
A long time ago, I realized my business model is really creating workarounds because First Advantage, unfortunately, I can tell you with a great degree of certainty, First Advantage isn't going anywhere for a while. And there's a lot of reasons why. One, they are the only, before First Advantage, there were 7 vendors that had to work in symphony to do these things. They used eScreen for this and eHire for that, and just different vendors to run criminal background checks. And some ran the MVRs and some did the drug screening. And when something went wrong, they had to yell at 7 different vendors. So FedEx actively wanted to try to make this as simple as possible, but there are so many legalities involved in this space. And it really comes down to legalities. They wanted one vendor to be able to go to and get an answer or resolve a problem. So they went out and interviewed and played with all these other companies. And First Advantage is the only one that has a DOT driver file. That is what separates them from everybody else. Because they have that DOT, because there was a vendor that had to hold the DOT driver file. So, you had to jump. It was just too much for a contractor to try to manage. Imagine that if you had 7 different First Advantages you had to engage with every day for one driver.
Yeah, no, they want right. A single throat to choke.
Yeah, so it's not the perfect process, and it is fallible and it is flawed, but it is the only one in this space that can do all of these things right now. We're working on it. Okay, so those are all the reasons why we're using one vendor. Now, First Advantage has signed a long-term contract with FedEx, and it goes beyond FedEx Ground. They were, in the eyes of FedEx, they were doing so well, they made them the preferred vendor across all of the operating companies, not just for their background checks for their drivers and the outside contractors, but for inside employees. My wife is still a FedEx Ground employee, and she was a recruiter in that space, and they use it for the package handlers. Ironically, my son worked during peak as a package handler, and he had to go through it as well. So the whole organization is now using that process. So the reality is they're probably not going away. So, our business model was really, we've realized we just have to design the workarounds to make the system better. So essentially, like I said earlier, First Advantage is a self-serve process. Our job is to make it full service for the contractors so that they don't have to waste their time. That we can give them good information and good predictions about when a driver is going to be ready, because there are a lot of things that happen behind the scenes. From the person request, the data has to go from the background check into the driver file, and from the driver file it has to push back and approve the person request, and they've got to do equipment familiarization tests. They have to do their e-verify. We watch a lot of that. Now, we don't do e-verify at the moment. We're working on it, but there are a lot of moving pieces that will get a driver hung up. And if you don't know where to look and when to look for it, it will frustrate you to no end.
Is this, Ed, a good time? Because I am watching our clock. I don't want to run past our planned time. Is this a good time to shift over to talk about annual review? Because that's going on right now.
Yeah, sure.
Tell me a little bit about what it is in very brief. I know everybody watching this knows about it, but I have no clue what annual review is. And if there's new contractors who haven't gone through it, they may need to know this.
So this is like the equivalent of tax season for an accountant. And I say that with all sincerity, because not only is it required every year, but the rules change every year on how it's done, and the process changes. And just like the IRS, they don't always have all of the communications out timely in order for that to happen. So here's what I can tell you are some best practices and some things that we have confirmed to be true through Fedex and through our own testing, because we constantly test. We're in First Advantage on Monday mornings. I'm up at 6 o'clock and I'm looking for what's broken this week so that I can develop workarounds. Again, back to our business model. We look for workarounds. So the annual review, it started Tuesday, February 1st. The first thing I will tell you is they tell you it needs to be done by the 15th. If any contractor on here has done this before, they realize that that is a fake date. It's not real. This process will most likely run for 60 days when it's all done, because there is going to be a lag. There's a lag in communication. There's going to be changes in processes. So here's what we do now. There was originally some talk about them not sending out the links to the drivers. We found out yesterday very quickly that they are sending out links. The driver can get to this link to do their annual review. And I should probably back up and say what the annual review is. Once a year, every driver has to have their MVR reviewed, their certificate of violation, and their clearinghouse check. Right. And what that's doing is it's just, a quick search to make sure nothing crazy happened with this driver that would make him ineligible in the last 12 months. Okay. And so this year I can tell you there is no need to sign a SIG, all right, which is the safety information guide. All drivers have to sign those. They've now moved that to 3 years. Okay. When the driver logs in, they have an expiration date on the SIG. So you will absolutely, if a driver signed it 12 months ago, they can very much sign it right now, but they don't need to. There's no harm if they do, but there's no help if they don't.
If they sign it now, does that push the next time they got to sign it out another year?
Yep, exactly.
Okay.
So that, right now, there are 3 ways for them to get into the application. And they log into the First Advantage again through the application. They've got to put in basic information, name, address, social security number, date of birth, driver's license information, declare whether or not you've had any accidents in the last 12 months or you've been arrested or anything like that. And then the system actually is working right. It's running in the automated background by itself. Now, you still need to monitor it, and there are some ways you can check that data. You want to look at the COV date, update date, as well as the MVR update date inside of the driver file. If it's not like today's date going forward, then that means that document loaded in there, there's a possibility something might not have gone right with the MVR. They transposed a number or put the wrong state or spelled their name wrong or something. So you do want to follow up on that. It is automated. I'd say probably 75, 80% of them will go through without issue, but there are going to be folks that just aren't tech savvy and or doing it on their phone and they just mess it up and we got to go back and fix it. Not a big deal. Honestly, the best answer is just have them go back and do it a second time. There's no, it's not going to break anything if they do it a second time.
Okay.
So they're going to fill out that application, and it has been confirmed that if a driver was badged in 2022, so basically in the month of January, they do not have to do the annual review. Here's a best practice I will give you for clients or for CSPs, that it will not hurt anything if your driver who just got badged did it again. And this is why it's good to know this. If you badged a driver in January of this year, January 3rd, we'll say, right? We're doing the annual review right now. His NVR and MedCard COV may expire next January before the annual review starts. And you're going to, and it's happened. We've been dealing with it for the last month. It's like, look, he's due for his annual review. It just, we just have to put a patch on it to get him to the annual review and keep him running. I would tell you if you have the ability, just have them do it. Again, it's a little extra work on your part, but they'll make it. You've now patched it so that they're in the same cycle as every other driver in the network, and they won't have any issues in the future. Next January specifically. The only unknown that I have not gotten an answer for as of this conversation, and I'm still shaking a lot of trees, we're testing a lot of things, is the email for the clearinghouse. There was a lot of debate inside of FedEx about how they were going to do the clearinghouse consent for this and going forward. It seems like they never really hashed it out. So I'm operating under the assumption that it works just like it will for a brand new driver. When your driver completes, when their MVR comes back and it's approved, and their commercial driver's license check comes back and it's cleared, that triggers First Advantage to send an email to tell your driver to go do the clearinghouse. On the subject of the clearinghouse, because that is a very painful one as well, if you've ever had to work in that space, we spend a lot of time resetting passwords for drivers in that space. It is very painful. But that's a DOT product. It's unfortunately FedEx has no control over it. The something to keep in mind, when your driver goes in to give consent, make sure they clear all the consents out, because if they've applied or they've been rescreened, they're going to have multiple FedEx requests for consent in there. If there's any of them lingering in there, they're each connected to a specific thing, but you just need to get them to consent to all of them to get them out of there, to clear that channel out, so that we know going forward all the good ones are, they're consenting to the one we need. It's already happened. A driver went in and gave consent. It was one from last year. He said, "Well, I just did it." So, yeah, unfortunately, it wasn't the right one. Okay. So it's those are I'm still waiting to see if they are getting an email to go and do that consent. But I can tell you, this is the best practice. I would tell a driver to wait 24 to 48 hours from the time they submit their application and then log in and check to see if there's a consent there. I've seen a lot of different iterations of what this is looking like right now. I've seen one driver say his email, they responded to him with an email after he submitted the app and it had a link in it. I've yet to see this email, but we're looking for these things. We're trying to get clear communication.
Okay.
But I do have a document that we are sending to our drivers, and we work with a lot of folks that are actually going to be at the summit, or clients of ours already. And we've had some pretty good success right out of the gate, with this document. We sent this document to all their drivers and their management team, who are also technically drivers in the system. And it created a lot of great conversation amongst the management team, in that they figured out a lot of their best practices. And one in particular has already had a high percentage of their drivers complete it in the first day.
I'm assuming this is a document for customers only.
It is, but I'm also willing to share it. It's fine. It's no real. It's just a best practice. It's what we found to work the best. If someone wants it, I'm glad to share it. It's not that.
And reminder, we're going to have all of Ed's contact info in the comments below the video and at the end of the video and in crawls below. So we'll put that in there.
But yes, it's. I will tell you. Another important thing to know, especially for the new contractors, FedEx, this is an important one in my opinion. Safety in the stations are going to be planted firmly on your backside during this annual review. And they're going to tell you it's 15 days of your guy's going out. He's not going to go inactive in 15 days. Typically what happens is these drivers that don't complete all the steps, they usually go inactive like August, honestly, by the time the system catches up. But the most important thing to know is FedEx does not give the local station and or safety folks a live access to the information. So essentially what happens is someone in PGH pulls a master document of all the people who have not completed it through the whole network. And then they sort and filter and funnel it down to each region. And then that region sorts and funnels it and sends it out to each station. And then that station sends it to each contractor independently. That takes like a day for that to happen. So what's happening is if you're being told on Thursday that your driver didn't complete the annual review, they're looking at Wednesday's data. So if he completed it on Wednesday, it's probably done. I would say give it 24 hours and wait for the Friday report to see if he's still on there.
They do this process daily?
Yes. Yes, I know. I thought I had control issues. It's a painful process. That's why I said it's very much like yesterday. I could have drank a whole bottle of tequila by myself. It was that kind of day, just trying to sort this out. And we initially did have some bad information. And unfortunately, on the one document I had sent out, I'd accidentally put the wrong login page for the clearinghouse because there's two of them. When drivers log in, they do it by email, but there's also a .gov login. It's like a single source login that like a lot of government employees can use. And on that one, it comes up and it'll say user ID. If it says user ID, you're on the wrong one. Up on the right-hand side, click on login and it'll flip you to the driver's side.
Ed, we're kind of coming close to our time stop here. I had a hard stop, so I apologize.
Yep, no problem.
Anything else that you wanted to cover? And I will say that to the audience, Ed has volunteered to come back and dive deeper into any of these topics or anything we miss. So please give us feedback. Send us email to Ed, to myself. Talk to us about what you'd like to hear about so that we can put together a follow-on video if there's a request for that. Okay.
Yeah, I'm kind of a First Advantage nerd. I say that out loud, and I know that it brings cheers and jeers. Some folks are like, "Oh, you're the guy that made this happen." Well, I mean, I can say I actually wasn't the guy that made this happen. I was just on the team. But I know the frustration. I have no problem. I know some of these things, they're a little difficult to navigate. I'm always available. I help folks all the time that aren't necessarily clients. It's fine. I know, that one guy has been a real thorn in your side, and you just need to get him on the road. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'll look at it, and if I can give you some quick insight to fix that one guy, it's fine. I will gladly share it with you.
Well, thank you. That's generous of you because I know it is your business. It's like a plumber coming to fix a pipe without charging you.
Yeah, it's more like I'll webcam you and show you how to fix it yourself.
Before we wrap up, I wanted to point out that Ed is going to be a speaker at the Linehaul Summit. He's going to be talking about First Advantage. So if you haven't signed up to go to the summit, this is the kind of educational stuff that you're going to see. There's over 20 sessions. Those are now up on the Linehaul Summit website. So you should go to the website and see the different topics, but Ed is going to be one of our important speakers there. Ed, are you on the FedEx Linehaul Contractor Facebook group?
Yes.
So you can reach out to Ed through that medium as well, or email or phone.
Absolutely. I'm always available. I know how painful this space is. And after being a driver quals person, they unfortunately, from legal perspectives, they can't give you the answers. They can paint broad strokes. I can tell you what's wrong and what you need to fix.
Awesome stuff, Ed. I cannot thank you enough for taking the time out of your day to come share all this information with everyone. I look forward to doing it again with you soon, hopefully. And
Absolutely.
I thank everybody out there watching. If you made it to the end, we're very grateful for your attention. We know time is valuable, but we hope you got value. And if you have more ideas for what Ed and I can talk about, let us know. Or selfishly, if you have other topics outside of Ed's expertise and you'd like to hear me talk with someone, I'm happy to go bang on their door and ask them if they'll do a conversation like this. Thank you so much. Have a great day.